So, when Jake approached me about maybe using gardening as a metaphor and a theme for our series on growing pains, I was ecstatic because I can talk about plants till the cows come home and never get tired of it. But I will try and be a little more disciplined. I think the plant kingdom is so extraordinary because we would not be here as human beings if it were not for the land plants. There is no way we could have survived as oxygen breathers if the world had not been populated by plants which breathe in carbon dioxide and exclude, whatever they do, breathe out oxygen. So they partner with all oxygen breathing mammals and insects and everything that is populating the world is because plants evolved. So I think our plant kingdom has a lot to teach us about growth, evolution, adaptation to change, and my favorite, coevolution. And coevolution is where you have two species that evolve in tandem with each other. So one species changes, the other species change. And this goes on and on and on over many millions of years. And it's really something that we all are familiar with because in any relationship that you have with your children, with your parents, with your pets, their behavior and what they do is going to influence you. And so you hopefully then change and grow along the course of your own evolution. I mean, our dog Charlie has only been with us for 3 years, and I'm already perfectly trained. I know how to sit, stay, and I like my treats. But in the video that we saw with Michael Pollan, he has this aha moment when he realizes that he's being acted upon by the potatoes, of all things, as much as he acts upon them. He's like the bees doing the work of the plant and in spreading its genes. And when he does, they both change, they both evolve, and they both develop. And as a master gardener, I think a lot about plants. And I love to just observe my plants and the birds and the insects in my garden. Watching their interaction is a fascinating look into the process of evolution and coevolution. And I think about evolution a lot, which might be a little weird, but sometimes I have a problem with our own species. And I wonder where we are in our evolution. My best assessment is that we're about midway. We're kind of in the middle. And hopefully, we will keep ourselves going as well as the planet until we can kind of get ourselves a little more up on that evolutionary ladder. However, plants have been evolving. Okay, yes, there we go. Plants have been evolving for many, many millions of years. As a matter of fact, the first land plants appeared around 470 million years ago, evolving from green algae. And those mosses and ferns reproduced by spores, which make exact replicas of their genetic material, so they could clone themselves through spores. Then gradually, over millions of years, plants developed vascular tissue so that they could grow tall, they could take moisture, they could take up into their trunks, and so they were able to grow forests. And just that took 70 million years. Next, it took, oops, whoopsie, nopes, it didn't. Oh, yes, it did. It took 260 million years of evolution until the first flowering plants emerged. That's a really long time. And along the way, I have no doubt that nature had many experiments, many life forms that arose and passed away because they weren't sustainable for one reason or another, or maybe some life forms that arose and were sustainable for a while, but not long term. There were many failures. So I'm just wondering if there's anybody here who's ever experienced a failure in their lives. Just once, twice. Not very much, I know, not very much. Although our time frames are much shorter than the plant's evolution, we are also evolving every day, sometimes painfully, experiencing our own successes and failures. And sometimes I'm sure it can feel like a million years. And here's what Michael Pollan has to say about failure. All the accomplished gardeners I know are surprisingly comfortable with failure. They may not be happy about it, but instead of reacting with anger or frustration, they seem freshly intrigued by the peony that, after years of being taken for granted, suddenly fails to bloom. They understand that, in the garden at least, failure speaks louder than success. By that, I don't mean that the gardener encounters more failure than success, although some years she will, only that his failures have more to say to him about his soil, the weather, the predilections of local pests, the character of his land. The gardener learns nothing when his carrots thrive, unless that success is won against a background of prior disappointment. Outright success is dumb, disaster frequently eloquent, at least to the gardener who knows how to listen. So just to know, for any of you who've experienced failures, your failure was eloquent. About 3.5 years ago, Aldea was facing the possibility of failure. The pandemic had forced us online, we were losing people, and we found ourselves without a pastor. We also needed to examine our soil, metaphorically, our weather. I don't know about local pests, so I'll have to see if we did that. But we had to examine our entire environment. And had we not had that failure or almost failure, we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be where we are today. So that struggle, that low point, was essential for us to adapt and evolve. I think for each of us along the road of our own life, when we see that we're not thriving, our pain and failure speaks louder than any success. And we feel like we're drop kicked into making changes, to adapt, to evolve, right? Can anybody relate to that, being drop kicked by the universe? And otherwise, we keep on falling off that proverbial cliff over and over again. Back to our friends, the plants. It took a long time for flowering plants to evolve because they had to develop a new strategy for propagation. They actually discovered sex. You see, you thought it was you. No, the plants. They were way ahead of you. They had to discover a way, once they combined their genetic material to make flowers, fruits, and seeds, but how to get that precious pollen from one plant to another. They couldn't move, so they had to come up with another way. They evolved to make nectar in their flowers, which began to attract insects and birds to gather their pollen and transport it, which led to symbiotic relationships with the insects, the fungi, and the animals. And this took a very long time. When you consider the biology, the chemistry of a plant, number one, plants manufacture their own food. They don't have to go out and find it. They manufacture their food through water, air, and sunlight. And then after that, they create not only their vegetative growth, but they create their flowers, their fruit that contains their seeds, and sweet nectar, which means that they're attracting all the other animals that have co-evolved along with them. So everybody wins in that scenario. Plant chemistry is so extraordinary that if a particular plant is being eaten by a particular caterpillar, and that caterpillar is threatening the plant can change its chemistry so that it will no longer taste good. And there are some plants, I think in South America, that will actually change their chemistry so that they poison the caterpillar or the pest. So when we look at our very common plants that are just everywhere, see them as the most extraordinary biological beings. So the symbiotic relationship among plants, insects, and animals reminds us that all life is interdependent. We survive and are nourished by nature and one another. As Michael Pollan says in The Botany of Desire, we are in the web of nature, not standing outside of it. And here John Muir says, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And Thich Nhat Hanh, we are not separate from the web of life, but strands within it, each tug and vibration shaping the whole. And this, by the way, is a hummingbird getting the nectar from Salvia clevelandii. And I'm going to give a big shout out for the Salvia genus of plants because they do very well in Arizona and they are very beautiful. Okay. So the phenomenon of coevolution is a powerful force that drives the diversity and complexity of all life, not just plants. This is where changes in one species lead to changes in another, and these changes happen over very long periods of time and benefit both parties. For instance, if we look at the evolution of hummingbirds and a very common plant, salvia, we can see how the flower shape, the color, and the scent have evolved to attract a hummingbird. And the hummingbird's physiology and behavior have evolved to efficiently collect nectar and transfer the flower's pollen. So here we'll have a little lesson. This is a common salvia plant. You can see it's very interesting and unusual in its shape. It doesn't have that radial shape that, say, a daisy does. This has the lower half that has two lobes and then the upper half. And you can see that lower half is very brightly colored. It's like, come here, come here, come here. And then on the upper part is where the anther and the pollen is. And so when Mr. Hummingbird or Miss Hummingbird is stuffed down there having all of that nice, lovely nectar, they are getting the pollen all over them. And this is what the plants set out to do. And now you can see that hummingbirds have evolved very long beaks and even longer tongues. There's an aloe flower down at the bottom left. One of ours, an aloe flower, Very deep-throated flower, brightly colored. This is very attractive to hummingbirds because they have great vision, and that deep throat on the flower indicates that it is full of very sweet nectar. Because plants manufacture nectar with different degrees of sugar and sweetness and different amounts. And a lot of plants don't manufacture much. So they want the insect, the bee, for instance, to take a little bit, done there, and keep going. But hummingbirds need a huge amount of nectar because their physiology, they are using up energy in enormous amounts. And so the flowers that they prefer are the ones that give them a lot of bang for their buck, so to speak. And then you can see the hummingbird at the top that has its beak covered with pollen. Here's another guy. Flowers over time developed very colorful and sometimes fragrant petals to attract bees, butterflies, and birds. And the flowers, as I said, contain the sweet nectar that is the animal's reward for getting the pollen transferred flower to flower. Traditionally, the flowers that attract the hummingbirds don't have a strong scent because hummingbirds are visually focused animals as opposed to bees that really are attracted to a strong scent. Over time, flowers diversified to fit every niche in our environment. But evolution didn't stop there. Interesting factoid, hummingbirds are a New World animal only. We only have hummingbirds in North and South America, none in Europe, Asia, or Africa. But the salvia plant originated in Greece. It originated in the Mediterranean and then spread throughout the world. So this little guy is a European salvia. You can see it has the same unique shape, but it has what we call landing strips on it. You can see the little white lines. Those are called bee lines or landing strips, and the flowers are much smaller. They're bee-sized. So European salvias have evolved to attract bees as their pollinators versus the New World salvias that are larger and that evolved to attract the hummingbird. As Zenji says, the whole universe is one great symphony of mutual conditioning and interdependence. We see that right here in our own community with our interdependence on one another. And when we participate in that, we are participating in that wonderful dance of life. And not to stretch my metaphor where it starts screaming, but I do think of Aldea as a beautiful flowering plant. It's been evolving for at least 20 years, shaped by all of us and all of you who have been its pollinators. And now it's evolving even more. Aldea is adapting to changing conditions. And adaptation, as we've seen, is a willingness to change and evolve, even if it's uncomfortable or risky, because it allows us to thrive on the other side. And 3 years ago, when we hired Jake, he took a chance, he took a risk, we took a risk. And that is how we wound up today with a room full of wonderful people enjoying each other every Sunday. As Jake mentioned last week, with the transition to the second service, we'll be experimenting with seeing what will work best for us all. The nectar that we, as pollinators, as members of Aldea, desire is still here. Then our cup is full. And just as the flower serves the needs of the hummingbird does what the flower can't do: transport the pollen. So, just to keep this metaphor going, what is Aldea's pollen? What is the pollen that we have as a community? I think it's the message, the values that were outlined over the course of the series that Jake did on ethos. It's the welcoming, accepting, and non dogmatic focus. And that's the reality, that Aldea is the living thing that we as individuals and a group are shaping. In some organizations, the body of their flower, stay with me, metaphorically, is fixed. It's not evolving. They say, here's what we believe, that's it, no more discussion. And it doesn't change. So, as a participant, as a pollinator, the individual has very little effect. You bring no evolutionary pressure to the organization, and it becomes static and unwilling to evolve. 20 years ago, as Community Church of the Foothills, Kevin Skinner, who was the pastor, himself brought evolutionary pressure to CCF, along with a group of other members, many of whom are still here today. And it transformed Community Church of the Foothills into Aldea, which continues to evolve as a living, vibrant creation. My glasses keep falling down. So I think of Aldea similar to the salvia that has evolved over time, shaped by the pollinators who seek its nectar into the myriad shapes and colors and sizes today. See how beautiful? I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of varieties. So if anybody wants to know where to get them, just come see. And so just as we are shaping Aldea, it shapes us in the same way that the salvias have co-evolved with the bees and the hummingbirds. Ooh, there's some more. Boom, boom. Come on. There are more pictures there. Okay. Phew. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. I think that's a very, very powerful statement. The people and the organizations and the animals and the plants that are most adaptable to change, who are responsive to their own internal and external pressures to evolve, are the most successful. I think I have to make a noise to make it go. Ah, there we go. So this is my metaphor now that I'm done. I think it's exhausted, and I think I squoze. Is that a word? Squeezed as much out of it as I possibly can. I want to end with a quote from Wendell Berry. Outdoors, we are confronted everywhere with wonders. We see that the miraculous is not extraordinary, but the common mode of existence. It is our daily bread. And I hope that when you look at plants now, you won't just see something common and ordinary. You will see it as the miraculous, for it truly is. And this concludes my talk. Thank you very much for listening. And if you would like to, Jake will come up and do some closing remarks, but then I'll leave the question up there if you would like to stay and maybe have your small groups and talk to one another. And the question to ponder is, As an individual, what are some ways that you have had to adapt and evolve in order to better serve your family relationships, even your own spiritual journey? So, thank you very much.